It is your Wednesday daily delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Good show coming up. Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune columnist, joins me here in just a few minutes to talk about recent piece he had, recent column on Chris Finch, the Timberwolves, the state of coaching in the NBA, and things that he feels that Chris Finch needs to improve on, and kind of the lay of the land for Finch going into a pretty important not only off-season, but 2023-24 season for the Wolves and their head coach. So we'll get into that. We'll get into some what I feel like is more second-guessing lately of Rocco Baldelli, the Twins manager, and get to a little Vikings NFL stuff at the end. First, though, what did I miss? Sorry, I'm not going to be much of a ray of sunshine today because it was not a good night in Twin Cities sports. Twins lost again. I'm going to start there, but before I get to it, Lynx coughed up a 19-point lead, lost to Atlanta 83-77, outscored, I believe, 24-10 in the fourth quarter of that game to lose. Second loss for them at the start of the year. Rough beginning for a team that, has a lot of growing pains to go through this year and is experiencing them early on. Minnesota United routed in the U.S. Open Cup 4-0 by Houston. And, oh, by the way, the Vikings, three of their best players are not at voluntary workouts, OTAs, and, varying degrees of alarm, varying different reasons why they aren't there, but I'll touch on that at the end of the show as well. So not a great day in Minnesota sports. I'll get to the three games that happened here right now, including the Twins losing for the sixth time in 8 games, all of them against these California teams that we thought would test them to a certain degree. Although, you look at it, the Dodgers certainly were going to be a test, and the Twins managed to win one of those games, were competitive in that series, felt like they were still playing pretty good baseball, but then it kind of unraveled against the Angels, lost 2 of 3, and now 2 straight losses at home to a pretty mediocre Giants team. And the way it happened on Tuesday was particularly disappointing. Have a 3-0 lead, and then they just can't get the ball over the plate. Sonny Gray unravels, walks a couple batters. There's 2 other relievers. They walk in runs. All of a sudden it's 3-2, and then a home run in the 7th does them in. It's a 4-3 loss. And so, some of that is pitching. Some of that is still that they didn't extend the lead on offense. Still just 3 runs in this game. And you just look at it right now, and, Chip and I will get into the second guessing that's been going on and the discomfort or disgruntledness with some of Rocco Baldelli's decisions. But, right now you just look at this roster and, on any given night, Rocco might be saying, that they're not getting it done at the plate like he did the other night. He might be saying they're not, executing pitches at the right time, which he was saying last night. And I just, I felt a lot better about this team 3 weeks ago than I do right now. They're still in first place in the terrible American League Central. I think we've seen enough of this division to say they're terrible. The Twins are 1 game short of their 50th game now coming up, 25-24. The only team in the division over 500, still 2.5 games up in the division. Haven't lost much ground even as they've been playing poorly. But if you just look at the big picture of the American League, they have the 9th best record in the American League, even though they have the best record in the American League Central. All 5 teams in the American League East better than the Twins right now, and 3 teams in the AL West, the Rangers, Astros, and Angels, have better records than the Twins right now too. That's, that kind of tells you, gives you the lay of the land with a more balanced schedule right now. The Twins are very much a mediocre team in the big picture of the American League, or have been playing like a mediocre team in the American League overall, even if they are leading this weak division. So they need to play better. That is not a newsflash. They need to play better. They just need to start executing pitches, having better at-bats, the things you need to do to win games, the things they were doing largely earlier in the season, especially the pitching. That's starting to falter lately, and they haven't been able to counterbalance that usually with more hitting. And that was my fear early in the year, was that the pitching would regress a little bit and the hitting might not cover it. Still hope for this team, obviously. They're still in first place, but I don't feel as good about this team as I did a little while ago, and that's concerning going forward. Now, the Loons kind of seem like they ran out of gas in the Open Cup, and maybe that happened to the Lynx too in this game, playing a lot of young players. Maybe not quite sure how to handle success, but the Loons had made a nice run in the Open Cup. That goes up in flames with the 4-0 loss to Houston. While the Lynx, my goodness, when you lead by 19, you'd like to think you might be able to lock that down, but their offense just went nowhere towards the end. Nafisa Collier ends up fouling out, and just a tough start. They're 0-2, both of those losses at home. Some adjustments to make along the way, and they've had some slow starts in recent years and been able to rebound from them to play better. So I'm not saying all hope is lost here because they've lost 2 games at the start of the year, but what we thought of this team at the beginning of the year, which was a young team trying to find its way, has proven to be the case so far. And another thing I said at the beginning of the year though is, wouldn't be the worst year in the world to kind of take your lumps, because that 2024 draft is going to be absolutely loaded. Players like Paige Beckers, players like Caitlin Clark. But like I talked about with Marnie Gellner on Tuesday's show, you do not want to wish time away. You'd like to see them play better, get something out of this season. I'm sure they are. I'm sure they will do that in whatever way, shape, or form that takes. But right now, does not look pretty on the court for the Lynx. And we'll see if it gets any better as the year goes on.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake. With 24/7 gaming, the good times never have to end. And you can satisfy your cravings at our restaurants and bars. Or relax in one of our luxurious hotel rooms. Those that play together, stay together. And don't forget to join Club M so you can spark new memories and bask in the rewards along the way. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Let's bring in Chip Scoggins right now, Star Tribune columnist. Had interesting piece the other day that I want to get into about Chris Finch. Also, maybe talk a little bit of Twins and Rocco Baldelli. Maybe it's coaches and managers day on daily delivery with you, Chip, and maybe an NFL subject I want to get to as well. But first off, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Mikey.
Absolutely appreciate it as always. The column I'm referencing was just a few days ago about Chris Finch and the Timberwolves, and kind of about the off-season landscape with the NBA and all these coaches that are being let go, all these high-profile coaches like Doc Rivers, Nick Nurse, like guys who have won championships, guys who have been at the top. And there's more than just those two, but a lot of guys have been like Budenholzers, like guys who have been winning championships in the last 3 to 5 years are out of jobs. Chris Finch, at a different point, I think, in the evolution of the Timberwolves, like they're not good enough to fire Chris Finch yet, is kind of how I would put it. But an interesting kind of examination of kind of what he needs to do to kind of take another step forward, kind of where his status sits, how the Wolves like him right now, and wouldn't be in the spot to maybe make a move like that. But kind of talk me through your process and what you wanted to make, the points you wanted to make by writing about that.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting intersection when you have Budenholzer and Doc Rivers and Monty Williams and these big name coaches who have had some championships, but also a lot of regular season success that and I'm sure in those markets they would say, a lot of fans would say they were justified because they fell short of expectations. And if you compare that to what's going on with the Timberwolves, who had big expectations and fell short, but I think for different reasons. And I agree. My premise was that I wouldn't have fired him this year. And Tim Conley really likes Chris Finch, so I think as long as Conley's here, he's probably safe for the short term. But it was a weird year for them. And my point was, if this doesn't improve dramatically next year or significantly, are we still going to have this same level of patience? I don't know. Maybe if Tim Conley is here, he will. But to me, I don't know if you'd call them red flags, but things that he needs to improve on.
Yes.
Chris Finch. The late game offense was atrocious. I mean, they ranked 25th in offensive rating in clutch situations, which is 5 minutes ago, the scoring margins within 5 points. I mean, 25th in that. For a guy who came here as, a noted offensive guru. I think the he uses it multiple times. He used it at the end of this word at the end of last playoff series, and again this year, the immaturity of his team.
Yeah.
Well, some of that's on the coach, right? I mean, we can't keep saying this team's immature because they're not young, they're not inexperienced. You know, you have Rudy Gobert throwing a punch, and Jay McDaniels breaking his hand throwing a punch, and so there's just I didn't think it was you know, there are reasons why this team underperformed. Towns' injury, the injuries in the playoffs, not, you know, being shorthanded there, but this can't be a blanket excuse for why this team played the way it did and was so all over. I mean, you know, the no shows against the really bad teams, the tanking teams. They were, of the 20 teams that made the postseason, they were the only one that had a losing record against losing teams.
Yeah.
Now, do you fault the players for that, for not getting up? They don't need a fire and brimstone speech to get motivated. But at some point, you're the coach. You're accountable for how your team plays.
Yeah, and even with professionals, even with the level of money these guys are making and the self-motivation, like, you do still, I think, take on a certain personality or take emotional cues from your head coach. And I think Finch is a fairly even keel guy, so maybe he expects that to kind of flow down from him and doesn't want to have to do more to raise the maturity level or raise, you know, I think maturity speaks to a number of things like those kind of emotional outbursts, but also the like you said, the inability to beat those lesser teams, which really cost them in the end of the year. I mean, they could have been easily, you know, a 4 or a 5 seed had they performed better.
Yeah, think about if they win 3 of those games.
Yeah,
you're not playing the Nuggets
against the very worst of the NBA. Not talking about like they dropped one to a team that was a little bit below them in the standings. Like the very worst teams, they lost to them routinely this year. Charlotte and Detroit, like just really hideous losses. And the other thing that I think you picked at that was right was, and I want to know from you what you think about this. Like the Gobert Towns pairing looked clunky. We've used that word a lot. Looked disjointed for a lot of the year, and the injury to Towns for 50 plus games in the middle of the year certainly was a factor. But even before that, and even after that, there was this kind of notion when they made the Gobert trade, and I think it was even at the Gobert news conference after they got him, where it was like, Finchy will figure it out kind of stuff. Like he's got the secret sauce. He can figure out how these two guys work together offensively. And when they were on the floor together, they had the worst. They had like a lower offensive rating than any team in the league, like for a full season. Like that to me was disappointing. Like they seem to have a certain amount of trust that Chris Finch could figure out, could unlock that duo and have things flow around them offensively. That just didn't happen. And that to me is the bigger key for this next season. If both those guys are still on the roster, and I think that's still an if, can he unlock that? Because he's been tasked with that, and he did not succeed with that last year.
Well, no, and maybe the challenge is we all knew it was going to be difficult, but part of it was I don't know if they know what they want to be. And Finch even said at his season-ending press conference, I think his phrase was he was never comfortable with his offense all year.
Yeah,
and part of it was you had D'Angelo Russell running your point guard for what 60% of the season, 70% of the season, so that you had that complication. Ant was coming into his own and becoming, once Towns was out, he was becoming the guy, the focal point. Then you incorporate Towns back in it, and you're trying to figure out these two bigs. So this is important offseason for Chris Finch to figure out, okay, how's this going to work?
Yeah.
And the early returns were not good. The late returns, he's a lot smarter basketball guy than either of us, but I just don't know that the two big lineup's going to work.
No,
I still have, and kudos to him if he can figure it out in a way that it's not clunky, but you're still, everything's flowing through Anthony Edwards. How do you make that work, Mike? I don't know what he's going to come back with at training camp that's going to be the magic answer for making the two big lineup work. I don't.
No, I don't either, but that's kind of on him. But the flip side of this is Connolly came from a place, Denver, that is now in the Western, now is in the NBA Finals after sweeping the Lakers, and they had plenty of years where they were either kind of building and then losing in the playoffs, and you weren't quite sure, like, are they really building like a championship style roster, or are they just building like a good regular season roster that they're going to lose right away? And they were patient. They stuck with Murray, Jokic. They got Gordon a few years ago. They drafted Michael Porter Jr. and he ascended. They gave him the max contract. People are like, oh, really? Michael Porter Jr. He's hurt a lot, but then he's been healthy. Like the patience model over there and sticking with Malone as the head coach, like that worked. So I'm imagining Connolly looks at that and says, we have to be patient here. We can't just keep tearing things up and restarting, which is, don't just fire the coach when you don't think it's quite right. Don't just trade Towns because you don't think the fit is quite right. That said, the money's going to get complicated soon. Like, I still think that the trade of Towns makes sense, but this is all kind of assuming that things are status quo. Things have to get better, because I don't know if they put too much on Finch's plate to solve this and gave him an unsolvable problem, or if he didn't do enough to get the most out of that lineup. Well,
there's part of me that says, there's been so much turnover and turmoil and upheaval throughout Towns' time here, whether it's coaching, front offices, offenses, personnel, that stability is fine. But when you talk about the Nuggets and their patience, they have a generational player.
Yes.
If you give me Joker, that solves a lot of problems.
And one who, by the way, like 5 years ago, we were kind of comparing Towns and Jokic and kind of wondering, like, okay, these guys, which one of these two is better? 1A, 1B, all NBA, who should be on the team? And I think we know whose game has grown in the last 5 years.
Mike, when you watch him, we saw it in the series here, but just watch him through these playoffs, and he makes everyone better. I mean, he is a generational talent. Just, he should win the MVP this year. I mean, he's that, I just think he's that terrific. So that solves a lot of problems, when you have him. This is the $1 million question. At what point do you become impatient?
Yes.
With Towns as your, because he is Anthony Edwards is your guy. He's your one now.
Yeah.
But you're still viewing Towns as a foundational piece.
Yes.
And you mentioned the money. If you stay the course, Mike, how are you going to pay Anthony Edwards, Towns? Jaden McDaniels is going to need a pretty sizable contract, and Gobert. How does that work?
Well, exactly. And, not just how you're going to pay it, but the new CBA, makes it really hard to be in the luxury tax, not just because of how punitive it is money-wise, but they really hit you hard in terms of how you can build the rest of your roster, like the Golden State model, where they've just kind of said, the heck with it, we're going to pay everybody and we're just going to keep going like this because we're making tons of money and it's worth it to us, even to be in the tax. Even if the Wolves wanted to do that, there are going to be more penalties in how do you build that. So how do you envision a roster where Ant's going to be getting a max, Towns is going to be on the super max starting in the 24-25 season, Gobert's still making big money, McDaniels, I figure, has got to be getting about $25 million a year. That's going to eat up a huge chunk of your salary cap and really make it hard to build out the rest of your roster with those invaluable kind of $5 to $8 million players.
Well, it is. And you look at what the Miami Heat are doing now. And, if you're not a diehard NBA fan, you look at the Heat's roster, you would wonder who these guys are.
Jimmy Butler, Bam, and a whole bunch of
guys that weren't drafted. But that's one. Scouting but also they got a really great coach in Spoelstra. But so I do wonder how much is the finances going to dictate that they have to look to move some of these pieces, because I just don't think it's all going to fit and be able to build out a roster with, as we've seen, you got to have core guys that fill roles. I mean, you just absolutely have to have it if you're going to be a legitimate championship team.
Yeah, and they're going to need a point guard at some point here, because I think Conley was a nice fit last year, and he's got another year left on his deal, but he's not getting any younger, and he's not cheap. Like something's got to give at some point. But the bigger takeaway here is, as much as this is a big year, big off season for the organization, it's a pretty big year, I think, like you said, for Finch next year, because if you don't grow from these last 2 years, and they've made the playoffs twice in a row, they hadn't done that for 20 years since Flip Saunders had KG. So he's accomplished some things, and he's brought them to a certain level. If you don't go beyond that, then the impatience probably starts in
well, that's it. And this was, when you look at this roster, this is not a rebuilding roster, retooling. This is a roster that's built to win right now. I mean, when they made that Gobert trade and you mortgage your future, you're not doing that to say, let's just kind of grow. No, you're doing to say, let's be a legitimate team in the playoffs. Well, it's great to get in the playoffs, but if you're getting bounced in 5 games every year, then what are you really accomplishing? So that's why I think this is, Conley probably has a totally different perspective than me, but I can tell you, if this team does not make a substantial step forward next year, the grumbling is going to be pretty loud with the head coach. And it feels like an inflection point for him this season coming up.
And it does. And what's interesting before we move on to Baldelli is this is not a coach that Conley hired. He just really likes him. He's worked with him before, but this was a Rosas hire before Rosas left.
Yeah.
So, the fact that he has that level of support from him is maybe a little bit unusual in how those relationships and kind of how that power dynamic usually works. But I agree. This is a massive offseason and a massive season coming up for the trajectory of this franchise. Are they going to kind of get stuck in the mud here of, better than it has been for a long time, but still not where they want to be? Or do they take a significant step forward? And to a degree, I feel like maybe the Twins are maybe not in the identical spot, but we talk about, the first 2 years of Rocco Baldelli winning division titles. 2019, like everything went right that year. It was the Bomba squad. They won 101 games. The next season, of course, was COVID. They only played 60 games, but they were a good team again. They won 36. They won the division. Then they fall off in 21. They fall off at the end of 22. And then this year, they look like they are probably the best team in a really bad division, but I've sensed some more of the Baldelli grumbling. Some of the things that got familiar, especially last year with the bullpen usage, with some of the substitution things, some of that. I get the sense that fans, maybe certainly not the Twins, because I think I saw a report that they picked up his option for 25. Like, I don't think the Twins are upset with Baldelli. I think internally they like him. The public, though, has some questions about, and I think they're getting louder right now this year, because there weren't a lot of games in the beginning of the year where you were questioning a lot of strategy. It was just like they're not hitting, and now it's like there's these games that have broken a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, last night, taking Kirilloff out of that lineup against San Francisco, I mean that set Twitter ablaze, and I always wonder how much credence to put in comments and social media, but it's people chatting. I mean, it's people who follow your team are weighing in, and you're right. I think there's just a level of frustration with not only Rocco but also the Falvey regime.
Yeah,
and bullpen, you see it implode, and the way this offense is that they just cannot score runs. The strikeouts, I think they lead the league in strikeouts. How much of that is, the front office, and how much of that is Baldelli? But yeah, I think fans are growing restless, even though they're in first place.
I know, it's weird.
Thank God they're in that division, because that division is horrible.
Yeah,
it is terrible.
Yeah. And their starting pitching is really good, and that's where you can point to the front office and say, you might not have loved how they got all these pitchers, that they had to give up Luis Arias to get Pablo Lopez, but that starting five, even with having to dip down and get Bailey Ober, who had a rough inning Monday, but has been really good this year, and Louis Varland's been quite good. Like that 1-2-3 of Lopez, Sonny Gray, and Joe Ryan's been awfully good, and the 4-5 since they've made that change, like that's carrying them, and that's a lot of what they've developed.
Yeah, and part of this is, I don't know, there's maybe offensive coordinator in NFL is on par with baseball managing in terms of the second guessing. Yeah, it seems like those two positions probably get second guess more than any in sports, right?
Or defensive coordinator here last year,
or defense.
That was a rare one. When do you ever usually hear a defensive coordinator get second guess? That was a new one last year.
Yeah, that was normally it's the offensive guy, because we can all call better plays. But I think baseball manager and offense coordinator in NFL are the two that get the two positions that get second guess more. But it does. I agree with your premise that there is a little bit more percolating in terms of the frustrating.
I've just noticed that the last few. It's just like God, why'd they throw Emilio Pagan? Oh man, Griffin Jacks again. Like some of it's like, well, who else? Like Joan Duran can't pitch 180 innings out of the bullpen.
Well, I think when you have 3 or 4 things in a row that backfire.
Yeah.
And that's what it's been. You've had Pagan inning, the start of what happened Monday night with San Francisco. So I think there's been maybe 3 or 4 decisions here that haven't gotten Rocco's way. And so, but you know what I think the whole thing goes back to, Mike?
Huh.
That post-game losing streak.
Yeah, that's it.
The postseason losing streak. I mean, I think Twins fans, because of that losing streak, are ready to. They're just they're on edge with everything that's going on with this team. And anything something goes wrong, it unleashes the frustration.
Yes, because you get
rightfully so.
Well, because you get the folks that are like, hey, even though I like this team, what are they going to do in the playoffs?
Exactly. Which is a hard way to. I mean, I understand it completely. But
it's 18 straight playoff losses. I mean, geez.
I understand. Yeah, that's. I mean, still, that's remarkable. We don't talk about it enough. Right?
That's remarkable. It's a North American professional sports record. That's how remarkable it is.
But I do think, man, that's a long way to watch a baseball season if you're if you're just like you can't enjoy the season because
that's true. Yeah,
it's 162 games.
162 games. Just
anxiety.
Yeah, exactly. Like even if you're enjoying it, like in the back of your mind, if you're watching it through the lens of in the back of your mind, you're like, this is all going to go to hell again. Then it's just is it worth it?
That's right. If all you see is out of one eye the game and the other eye, you're waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah, I know it. Well, yeah, I'll be curious just to kind of see how that plays out. The division's not good, but I do think that Cleveland could play better. Chicago still has a roster that could catch fire. Like I think the Twins, you might see at some point them regretting not putting the foot on the gas a little bit more and not being up 7 here instead of 3. Getting them. They got a field goal right now instead of a touchdown. It has to feel. It feels like.
Yeah, I'll say this, Mike. Do we have any level of confidence this lineup's going to start hitting? I mean, we said it from the beginning, like this was going to be the one question mark, and it's proven to be true that they just can't score.
Putting an awful lot of faith in a guy who has torn his ACL twice and really hasn't done much. Royce Lewis is being really deemed, he should be here probably in about a week, I would think. Like
June 1st, right?
Yeah, people are saying, wait for Royce Lewis, and that's an awful lot to put on him, because I think before that it was wait for Kirilloff, and Kirilloff has really helped. But they need other help too. And maybe Correa's getting going a little bit. Buxton looks like maybe he avoided the worst of that injury scare and just needed that day off. We'll see, but I've got faith they can hit a little bit better, but their offense has been too all or nothing, and that's because
feast or famine. Yeah,
it's way like not just home run versus strikeout, but some games with 11 and a lot of games with 1 or 2.
Yeah, it's definitely got the feast or famine quality to it, and you have to think Correa is going to start hitting it some.
Yeah, and he's been better, a little bit better lately.
He's been better lately, but you're still going to have holes in that line. Yes. We've talked about it ad nauseum, but if Buxton doesn't play center field, we saw it last, Monday night with Taylor. I think he had 3 strikeouts in a double play, right?
Yeah. Really quick at the end here, I was kind of not surprised because I know how TV and money rules everything, especially in the NFL, but allowing them the possibility to flex a Thursday night game into a Sunday and vice versa, even with 28 days notice, like that would bother me quite a bit as a fan, because you make your plans kind of further a lot of times than 28 days out, especially if you're going to travel somewhere to see a game. Yeah. Like this might cause people who are planning to go to a game to miss a game. And I guess they feel like the trade-off is you're going to get a better TV game for the millions of people who watch.
Well, that's what it is.
I don't know. That one's, it didn't shock me because I know the way the league works, but it doesn't feel very fan friendly.
They don't care.
They don't care.
They are tired of the narrative of the Thursday night games or clunkers. Talk about, two groups of people that it's going to annoy to no end. Fans of the team that's, gets moved, and the players.
That's going to get moved. Because now they can play 2 Thursday games, which they hate.
But guess what? It's not going to annoy the fans that are going to get a better matchup on a Thursday night, potentially, than the clunkers that we see sometimes. And so if there's money to be made and something that's going to help the product and increase revenue, the NFL is always going to do it. They don't care what the byproduct is. So the good news is, a team can only be on the road twice, or can't be on the road twice, and they can only play the games Thursday night twice. But I agree with you, and we see it so much now, Mike. When you go on the road, and it's not just Vikings fans, it's when they, when teams come here, fans travel in the NFL.
Yeah,
it's become like a big part of the fan experience is to go see new stadiums or go, to do that. And so I would be real cautious in that, was it week 13 to 17 that they can do those games, because you may buy that ticket well in advance for a Sunday game. And, oh, by the way, can you go on Wednesday night?
or vice versa. Like you might buy a ticket for a Thursday night game, and then all of a sudden it's on a Sunday. And
that's can you travel Thursday and miss work and travel back? So it's I don't know how many people that would affect, but it's going to affect some.
It's going to affect some people, and it's
but it's
the weird thing too is like, how do you even know a month in advance that you want to flex a game? Like I don't even know if they're going to wind up doing this.
I'm guessing it's going to be used less than we probably think.
Yeah,
because as we know, a lot can change in a month in the NFL.
Yes.
The team that you might think's hot or whatever, all of a sudden loses 3 straight. Now you
flexed into a dud, and there you go.
The game is not as attractive as you thought it was going to be. So I have my, I won't be surprised if it's not used as much as, but it will be used, because if it's clear that they have a dud on the schedule late in the season, they're going to flex out of that thing.
Yeah, but the NFL remains king. I'm writing about this a little bit for, I think, later this week or next week, just kind of, their piece of this whole TV puzzle. And the one thing that they've got going for them, I mean, many things they have going for them, but they're not reliant at all on regional sports networks. Everything for them is national TV contracts. It's split up between everybody. It's fair. And their only thing right now is trying to figure out how to slice and dice these into even smaller sub packages like Peacock and things like that, where they're getting even more money out of this and driving people to different places, which might drive people crazy, but it's kind of the way of the future.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they're gonna stream the one wild card game, correct, on Peacock, and we all grumbled and oh my gosh, and guess what? People are going to find it and they're going to pay for it, because they know we're suckers. They know fans will find it and want to pay for it to watch it. I mean, you said it right. They're king, and they're going to lead the way in how this works, right? Because I don't know if other sports will be able to do it in a way, because it doesn't have the popularity of the NFL.
Well, the inventory in the NFL is so limited too, so every game feels a little bit more special. Like you split up a 162 game baseball season, it doesn't feel as special.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the NFL, I mean, they got games. They get YouTube has the Sunday ticket rights now, and Amazon's got streaming of the Thursday games. Peacock's got a regular season game and a playoff game. You still got games all over the place, like the Monday night games on ESPN. You got NBC, CBS, Fox. Like their games are all over the place. It used to be 2 channels. Back in my day, Chip, 2 channels.
How long before they're playing on every night of the week?
They added the Black Friday game this year, right? That's the new one. I don't know that they'll. I could see.
Do you put it past them?
They already squeezed in. They've squeezed into that kind of Saturday space where there's no college football games towards the end of the year. Squeezing into that Black Friday space. I don't know where else they can go. Like it's Tuesday.
They will find a way.
They could maybe play Tuesday.
They'll find a way to get on Tuesday.
I don't think you could play on a Wednesday because that's too close to either Sunday. But
they'll find a way.
They'll find a way. That's a good point. They'll find a way.
Eventually, they'll find a way.
Yeah. Well, we always find a way to get you some quality sports talk when Chip is on. Appreciate it as always, Chip. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, brother. Thanks, man.
Let's throw a couple of postscripts to my conversation with Chip Scoggins into the cooler. Number one, sounds like the Suns are interviewing a bunch of different coaches to replace Monty Williams, including Doc Rivers and Nick Nurse. All of those guys, coaches that we talked about with Chip Scoggins in terms of just the high-profile coaches that have been fired this offseason. And, Chris Finch not being in that profile yet, the Wolves not being good enough, strangely enough, maybe to make a coaching change yet. It sounds like maybe an oxymoron, or that's not something that would be logical. But you have to reach a certain level before you become disappointed with not quite reaching the top. I don't think the Wolves are there yet, but like Chip and I talked about, an important year for Chris Finch and the Wolves this year, and we'll see where that winds up, and we'll see who the Suns ultimately end up adding. By the way, the Heat failed to close out the number 1 seed Celtics. It's 3-1 in that series now after the Celtics won Game 4 pretty handily in Miami. Watch out for that one, because now they go back to Boston for Game 5. If they get a little bit momentum going, it's never been done in the NBA that a team has come back from a 3-0 deficit. But a 1 versus an 8 would be the perhaps the exception to that rule, or the possible exception to that rule. We'll see if they can get another one in Game 5 and really put a scare into Miami, which has to this point been on a dream postseason run. And like I said at the beginning, 3 of the Vikings' most important players not at voluntary workouts, OTAs, this week. Our Andrew Kramer reporting that he did not see Dalvin Cook, did not see Justin Jefferson, did not see Danielle Hunter on the field on Tuesday out at a TCO Performance Center in Eagan. Now, Dalvin Cook, Vikings trying to work out a trade for him perhaps still, or work out some sort of restructure. Maybe that's a long-term thing where we're not going to see much of him on the field in purple, and that they're trying to keep him away while that transpires. Jefferson sounds like it's more of an issue if he's just working out on his own right now. These are not mandatory workouts. Sounds like he'll be back in June once minicamp starts. That's what KJ Osborne said. Maybe he'll be here even sooner, so not too worried about that one. Danielle Hunter's the one that's interesting, because I think he wants a new contract. Not being here, sometimes that is a signal of displeasure with how much money you are going to make. So let's watch the Danielle Hunter situation as the offseason goes along. That will do it for me here today. Good stuff coming up on Thursday and Friday as well. Hope you're having a great rest of your Wednesday. Beautiful days outside. Get out and enjoy the sunshine. Listen to this podcast. Always, always, always take it with you. That's what it's for. We'll see you again on Thursday.